Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Libreria Donceles. So my name is Pablo Helguera. I am very uh, honored to be here, and I'm very thankful for Big Car to having hosted this project here. This is going to be the second to the last version of the bookstore, so it's becoming more special as it ends. And I will tell you a little bit about this project. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and about the story of this bookstore. I am from Mexico City, where I was born and raised. And books have always been an important part of my life. A lot of my family were or are writers. And my grandfather was a businessman who wanted to be a novelist, and he never really quite became a novelist, but he bought a lot of books, and he had a lot of books in the house. And I think he self-published a couple novels, which were not very good, Then my uncle kind of used them to fire for the chimney, many years later. However, he had this wonderful book collection, and my father also was a very avid reader and lover of literature. And so I grew up, I've told some people here, before the era of internet, obviously. I believe I'm kind of one of the last analog generations, And being a kid in this house of my parents was interesting because they did have a big library, in this old house, and I loved hanging out in the library. And my brother, who did become a writer, would tell me stories about literature, simplifying them for me, telling them oh, this is a really important book, and Dostoevsky was an amazing writer because he told these stories about this and that, And so the characters, the writers that were famous, or philosophers and such, became kind of characters in my own fantasy land, So instead of or with Superman and Batman, I also learned about Sartre and Hegel, and to me they were kind of equivalents in a very weird way. But the fact is that as I became an art student and I actually went to school at the University of Chicago, I was in dire need for some, what I felt ideas, intellectual and nutrition, And I felt that art school was not giving it to me. I felt that art school was about just teaching me how to paint and art history, and I felt that I needed ideas. So I was very frustrated that I was not in a university, and I ended up gravitating towards used bookstores because I also didn't have any money. So I would just walk into bookstores, and at that time in Chicago, I don't know if anybody knows Chicago well here, but there's a suburb of Evanston that had a really wonderful bookstore called Bookman's Alley. It was a bookstore that, like most used bookstores, are a little idiosyncratic. You walk into the bookstore, and it kind of feels like it's like somebody's living room. It's kind of really odd, and the person is a little eccentric, and they have a cat or something down there, and it's kind of a mess. There's an old couch. And nothing kind of makes sense, and it is, again, not also the type of place where you go with a very specific thing that you're looking for. No, it's not like you walk into Barnes & Noble and say, do you have 100 Years of Solitude? You basically walk in there, and the rule is that you basically have to get yourself lost for a while, And that's how you operate in a used bookstore, It's what you find. It's kind of like entering a mine and mining something interesting, And to me, this was a really important thing to experience. I love this idea that even though I was broke and I had maybe $5, maybe I could find a book for that amount, And then I will find an old, I don't know, a medieval play, or a poetry book or something else that was special, and it made me feel very special to have this book and have this piece of knowledge that in a way had been forgotten, that somebody had left there. And I felt that, to me, knowledge started becoming this pursuit of something that was unseen by others. And I think to this day, being an artist to me is a lot about that, about we as artists try to bring back things or bring our attention to those things that have not been thought about or seen or considered, you know. So that was my student years experience, and I've always been a book lover, you know, and I was somebody I have a lot of books, and and then I became involved in performance art and public art and what is now known as socially engaged art. And when I was in conversation with a gallery around 3 years ago, the gallerist basically said, well, would you like to do a show here? And I kind of joked around and said, like, oh yeah, it would be fantastic to turn your business into a failed business, you know, like a bookstore, you know? And the guy said, okay, let's do it, you know? And then I thought, like, oh my God, I'm really gonna do this? So I went to Mexico City to figure out what to do. Now, the other part of the story is that I live in New York City. And if you have ever been to New York City, you might know that, you know, it's a very multicultural metropolis. You know, it's there's practically every language is spoken around the world. It also is a fourth Latino. You know, like there's the Latino population of New York City is around 2 million people, so it's massive. At the same time, used bookstores are disappearing. You know, we have across the street a used bookstore, which is fantastic, but these are now a dying species, because, as you might also know, you know, e-books and internet and all that is basically killing the physical object of the book. You know, we will soon be living in an era where there's no newspapers. You know, newspapers are dying as well. The printed material is very difficult and expensive to produce and to ship. You know, and that cannot compete with just downloading a PDF, right? But having with all these things in mind, and also really encountering the climate with anti-immigration in the country, I really came to the conclusion that it was really important to have a place where we could speak about what culture is in a very proactive way, you know, and show that, you know, if we are thinking about the cultural legacy of Latin America or Spain, we should consider everything that is being, you know, written that has come from it, you know. And so I went to Mexico City to see if I could really put together a bookstore, and I started offering to give some of my artwork in exchange of books, see if that works. And then I got like maybe like 6 books, you know. I was like, I don't think this is gonna work. I think I have a bookstore with like this, you know. Then I called a newspaper and said, listen, there's like a really important campaign going on here. It's a big deal, you know, and I need you to write about it. And finally, I convinced a newspaper in Mexico City to write about what I was doing. And then I had the opposite problem. Then I had hundreds of people calling me, you know, saying, I want to give you my books. And I mean, at first, you know, I asked a friend and his families to be the house where they would receive the books. And like within a few weeks, they couldn't handle it anymore. They were completely inundated with books, you know. It was like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, you know, like, you know, like then we cannot stop the amount of books. Like then we actually had a museum that delivered a trailer full of books. We had to turn him away because there was no way we could actually get that many books. Within 2 weeks, I had 25,000 volumes, which is around like 3 times as much as what you see back there. And it was a really beautiful and unbelievable experience. Of course, I had no art to give to all these people. But people didn't really care, you know. I mean, a lot of the people that you see here are the donors that gave the books for the first Libreria Donceles. And what was also very heartwarming for me was that there were people from all walks of life. They were like older and younger. They were like people who were teachers, children who were bringing the children's books. They were professors, there were artists, there were writers, there were anything you can possibly imagine. And also people who I had no idea who they were. They were just complete strangers who would basically come and bring their books to me. Because in Mexico, there's something really powerful about thinking about what happens across the border. You know, and when you live in Mexico, it's very painful to know that your people are suffering on the other side, and you are completely powerless to do anything about it. You know, so in a funny way, I had a third world country giving aid to the most powerful country in the world, you know, through books, you know. And so we opened the bookstore, and it became a social space. You know, it became a place where we invited anybody who wanted to propose a program, like an event, you know, like a reading, a conversation, music, as long as it has to do roughly with Latin America or with the Spanish language, you know, because it wasn't, the idea was to keep somewhat the focus to what we do, you know. And that's how the tertulias were born. A tertulia is a soiree, like a cultural soiree where, you know, people come together, and anything can happen in a tertulia. It's really, it's kind of like an open mic night. You know, you can actually read from something you wrote, or talk about a book that you're reading and do a little book discussion or whatever, you know. Then the problem that we had was, because I was in an art gallery, the art gallery needed to have me out of there, you know. And, you know, it was kind of hard, you know, with all these books there, you know, how do you get out of there? I found a museum in Arizona that was really interested in bringing the bookstore to Phoenix. And so we took the bookstore to Phoenix, and it was a really important moment there because Phoenix is also in a very important place in terms of the debates regarding immigration. So we worked with a lot of immigrant rights groups to do programs there, and as well as many art students that were from the university to produce programming there. And since that time, the bookstore has continued to move around. You know, he became an itinerant bookstore. Then we went to San Francisco, to the Mission District, which used to be of Latino background. Then we went to Seattle, and then Chicago, and now Indianapolis. And the project will end in Boston. So it's, to me, has been like a very special experience to do this project. And it is really is predicated on something that's very intimate and very personal. I was talking about just now that, you know, sometimes the works that we produce, the latest work that we produce, in a way, it's kind of like a summary of everything else we have done before. And also that the works that we produce have been always inside us in some way, and they just come out in very unexpected forms. When I was putting together the bookstore, I was going to thrift shops and places to see where I could find like an old lamp and a kind of putting together the bookstore, but in a very intuitive way. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And then at some point I realized that I was pretty much reconstructing my mother's living room, you know, that I was pretty much kind of trying to maybe unconsciously recreate that sense of home that I have always yearned for. You know, this idea that, you know, I'm creating a sanctuary where I can feel happy, where I can feel that I'm connected to all these different voices that comprise my past and the past of others. And that's what I hope this bookstore can do for individuals. And even if you do not speak Spanish, it doesn't matter. It's really about something bigger, I think. You know, it's really about how books change our lives, how they impact our lives. And you all have shared how books are an important aspect of your life, you know, and how it connects us to others, you know. And this is why Donceles exists. It's a social practice project, and it's also an artwork because it cannot be a business anymore, you know, because if I were to do this business, it would probably last like a day, you know. And I'm not a businessman for sure, you know. But I think that it's important to preserve these spaces to connect with one another, and to experience books as objects, as this friend that can accompany you for many years. One of the nice things that I always heard from the people who participated in the project was that when they were picking books from their house to bring to me, they had to kind of review their whole lives, you know. Like I had a friend who was like, oh my God, I had to go through all the books that I had in high school, and I just like it reignited all these feelings and all these things that I was going through when I was in high school, you know, like it was too much, you know. And also I had an uncle who has now passed away, he was 93 years old, who brought me 2 boxes of unbelievable books from the 30s and 40s that he bought when he was a teenager, and I was like, I cannot accept the books that you are giving me. And his answer was, I'm not going to be around much longer, but this is really important. I really want that you take these books for this project. This is really larger than both of us, and you should really take them on. So that spirit and those words have always been in my mind, and I hope that they can be of interest to those who visit the store here in the next couple months. First, I want to stress that it is a bookstore. It's not a library. But the reason why it's a bookstore is very specific, and it's because I really want that all of you walk away with a book, and that book remains with you forever. That's the one thing I really like. I mean, to me, the library is a wonderful thing to have, but there's also something impersonal about the library process, where you borrow a book, but you have to bring it back because it's never yours. But that in that sense, not in a capitalist way, I feel like that sense of possession or like relationship with the thing, I think is very important, and I wanted to support that. At the same time, this is really not a business, we'll never make money from doing this, because of the cost of shipping books, because of the cost of running something like this. Perhaps if I was a genius in business, I would find a way to do it, but that's not really the objective. So what we do is we say that the books are pay what you wish, and you yourself decide how much you want to contribute toward the project. And all the proceeds of the bookstore always go to another organization. They don't go, like I don't take the money or anybody else. Like basically, the idea of the project is that whatever money that is made goes to support an organization who has as its mission to teach either Latino culture or the Spanish language. For example, in Chicago, where we were for a couple months at Chicago Cultural Center, all the money went to a local organization. Contratiempo is a magazine. And in Seattle, it was another center for Latino culture that helps those social services and provides educational services. So it's like a small way in which, as a community project, we can simply, even in a tiny way, do a contribution to support what's the local cultural activities. Yeah. I did do a project 10 years ago that was called the School of Pan-American Unrest, where I drove from Alaska to Chile. And the idea was to have conversations with people all over the world, or not all over the hemisphere, about what it meant to be American in the largest sense of the word. And I feel that Donceles kind of became a similar project in the sense that it's just like a self-contained traveling project, not transcontinental, but just within the United States. So this project definitely inherited a lot from that initial trip that I did. But I don't know what's the next thing, and I wish I knew it, But like I said before, some of these ideas just pop up, they just happen, and once they happen, you realize that it made a lot of sense. Like now, if you had asked me, this is, like a friend of mine told me, well, it seems that you are the only person who could have come up with this idea, which is probably not true, most likely not true. But at the same time, you can. If you know me, you would know why it makes sense that this is happening, or that I had this sudden obsession. So I think as artists, you never know really what's the next thing, but it just it becomes kind of like a very spontaneous and unexpected. And then when it happens, then it feels like very logical. Like, of course, why didn't you think about that before? What I was going to propose to do today for this group is to do a mini workshop. And you don't have to speak Spanish to do it. How many people actually understand Spanish here? 2. Okay, it's fine. You don't really need Spanish to do this experiment. This has the intention to take you into the bookstore and look at the books. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask each one of you to write a one-line short story in Spanish. And you can appropriate the text of any books you want in the bookstore. Okay, There's in Mexican literature, there's a very famous short story by a writer named Augusto Monterroso, who actually was from Guatemala. And the story is called The Dinosaur. You know, I wrote it up over the wall over there in Spanish, which goes, Cuando despertó, el dinosaurio todavía estaba ahí. When he awakened, the dinosaur was still there. That's the end of the story, you know. So it's, of course, a very simple and very provocative story, right? The point is, that a short story can just be one line. In the 19th century, there was a writer, Frédéric Fénéon, who worked on a newspaper in Paris. And his job was to write the police blotter. You know, the police blotter, basically like a man was attacked, in the corner of like the, X place, he was found without his shoes. That was the end of the story, So he actually would find these very weird occurrences that happen in a big city all the time, right? Like a frog was found in the bakery of Miss Leonard, or something like that. And very, very strange, unexplainable things that, that we can see in the local news every night. Like, why the hell is this happening? Like, why is this person there, or why did that incident took place? There's of course much more to the story, but the only thing that you have is that one little piece of information that tells everything, the whole story. And those kind of little bits of news have always inspired writers. If you have read Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, it's very similar. He just read about this horrible crime that happened, in this house, and then he basically writes a whole novel about it. But Frédéric Fénéon, who was doing this job, he decided to publish later a book called Novels in One Line, where he basically accumulated all these little bits and pieces of information of Parisian life of the turn of the century, and then each one of these lines was a novel. And when you read them, they're really cool and really kind of interesting in many ways. So what I would like to invite you to do is to go into the bookstore, pick a book that picks your attention, and try to find a line that you think could actually tell a story. I know that it's going to be hard if you do not speak Spanish, but I think you can recognize enough words in the books, and you might also recognize the different sections. And I will be there and available to help you if you need me, but if we can just go ahead and look for the books. We'll reconvene in a few minutes here. So I'm just going to read some of the stories that emerged, okay? No es en realidad un carbón. This is not really charcoal. Then, tengo además el honor de confirmar en nombre del gobierno de Japón el acuerdo arriba expresado. I also have the honor to confirm in the name of the government of Japan the accord expressed below. No, not below. Let's say above expressed. Don't ask me where it came from. La mayor parte de los habitantes de esta plaza será preciso que la abandonen pero esta es una desgracia en ocasión a la fuerza de las circunstancias. The greater part of the inhabitants of this plaza will be necessary to abandon it, but this will be a pity that will be caused by the force of circumstances. Esto es lo que dicen todos, murmuró una vocecilla dentro de mi cabeza. This is what everybody else says, a little voice inside my head told me. Sin reglas de arte, borriquitos hay que una vez aciertan por casualidad. Without any art rules, there are little donkeys that every now and then they hit it right just by chance. Parecía reflexionar intensamente, muy concentrada en sí misma. Su disolución era eminente. She appeared to reflect very intensely, very concentrated onto herself. Her dissolution was imminent. This is from a novel by Juan Marcé known The Last Journeys with Teresa. El Dr. Meyer Shapiro ha investigado el problema del estilo en un brillante ensayo que deja poco que decir sobre la materia. Dr. Meyer Shapiro has researched the problem of style in a brilliant essay that has little to say about matter. This is from a book by Alfonso Casos, a theology book. La antiquísima cultura y el inventor del fuego. The antique culture and the inventor of fire. Ya se sabe que los peces pueden ser helados en el interior de un bloque de hielo y recobrar más tarde la vida. Pescador. It is known that fish can be frozen in the interior of a block of ice and they can later recover life. I had no idea that was possible. No nos fue posible ubicar con precisión la fecha de nacimiento de la idea de fundar o establecer una escuela de arte en la ciudad de Jalapa. It was impossible for us to find with precision the date of the birth of the idea of founding or establishing an art school in the city of Jalapa. La muerte y el olvido son parte de la condición humana. Death and forgetfulness are part of human condition. This is from writer Jorge Castañeda of his complete works. That's it? Oh, that's your notes. Okay, so we're done.
All right. Cool.
Thank you. This is great.